"Daddy, we want this one." As the crowd murmured, the cowboys' twins urged, "We want this one, Daddy." The widow was too big for a marriage. "You're not going to stay here." In the kitchen of her parents' house, Nora Ashford held a worn carpet. Bag as the words of her father pierced her like a knife. "Papa, please," she said in a whisper. "I am able to work. I am able to assist." The voice of her mother was as harsh as shards of glass. "Since the day of your birth, you have only been a burden. We thought you would finally be someone else's issue, so we married you off at the age of 17. And you're back now." Nora's throat constricted. "Fever killed Thomas." "I didn't." Her father interrupted. "It doesn't matter what killed him. What people say is what counts. You worked him to death, they say. Say he was broken by your weight. Imagine that he was punished by God for marrying a lady like you." Her mom folded her arms. "Our neighbors make fun of us. The whisper in the chapel is, 'We can't keep you here.'" She thrust a train pass into Noah's trembling hands. "Mail order. Brides are traveling on a wagon to Ridgewood Territory. You're accompanying them," Nora remarked. "But I'm not a bride," in a voice that was hardly audible. "Nobody desires. After that, you'll get a job. Her mum lost her temper. A boarding house, a kitchen, anything. You're not going to stay here, though." Her father took hold of her arm and dragged her in the direction of the door. "In an hour, the train departs. Don't return." After her, the door banged. Tears were running down Nora's face as she stood by herself in the chilly dawn. She had been expelled once more. 3 young ladies in colorful gowns were giggling close to the platform at the train station. The mail-order brides are quite optimistic. "Who's that?" they muttered as they glanced at Nora. "She doesn't have a bride-like appearance. She might be traveling as livestock." There was laughter. With her eyes focused on the ground, Nora tightened her grip on her bag. The station master yelled, "Every bride is embarking for the Ridgewood region." Nora moved towards the direction of the train. The sound of a man's voice came from the crowd. "Wait a moment. Who let her to enter? The entire train will be sunk by her." More giggling. It burnt in Nora's face. However, she boarded and sat down in the rear corner, away from the other female passengers. She gazed out the window at the town she would never see again as the train drew away. At the age of 23, she was a widow, undesired and all by herself. The train arrived at Ridgewood Station a few hours later. Ranchers and town residents thronged the platform, eager to witness the brides. First to go, the 3 young ladies were greeted with tipped hats and grins. Then Nora resigned. The audience fell silent. One of the ranchers whispered, "Who's that?" Another remarked, "She's not on the list." The station master frowned as he looked over his clipboard. "Instead of 4 brides, we were hoping for 3. The sound of Nora's voice was hardly audible. "I'm not a bride. I'm going to Silverpine to visit my sisters. For your sister, I simply had to stop here." A woman's sarcastic voice pierced the atmosphere. "Or were you hoping to be taken by some desperate idiot?" The crowd erupted in laughter. "Take a look at her size. She is too big to marry." Someone began to chant quietly. "Too big to marry. Too big to marry." Others joined in. Nora's hands were shaking. Wishing she could vanish, she retreated a step in the direction of the train. Then the sound was broken by 2 little voices. "Daddy, this is the one we want." Everyone pivoted. 2 young girls, identical twins wearing vivid blue dresses, escaped the throng and sprinted past the lovely brides. They came to a halt in front of Nora and fixed her with wide, intent eyes. "She's perfect," declared the first female. "She looks like the mama in our storybook." The other girl took Nora's hand. "We want her, Daddy, please." People in the crowd started gasping. The station master gave a tense laugh. "That's not one of the bride's girls." "We want this one," the first girl said more loudly. A towering person emerged from the rear of the crowd. The man had rough shoulders, and the brim of his hat cast a shadow over his face. His boots made strong, purposeful steps against the wooden deck. As he walked, the crowd dispersed. He paused in front of Nora and gave her a downward glance. His face was unintelligible, just evaluating, nothing kind or harsh. "Do you require lodging?" He spoke in a harsh, low voice. Nora stumbled. "I was only going to ask a straightforward question. Do you need a place?" "Yes," she muttered. "Then you will accompany us." The master of the station sputtered. "You can't be serious, Caleb." Nora was not left out of Caleb's sight. "My daughters made their decision." He turned and moved in the direction of a wagon near the platform's edge. Grabbing Nora's hands, the twins drew her forward. Whispers broke out in the crowd behind them. "She's going with him! They are insane, those girls!" The wagon's wheels creaked as it went across rocky terrain. Behind them, soft clouds of dust ascended, and the grassland was covered in long shadows from the late afternoon sun. Sitting on either side of Nora, the twins' little bodies were squeezed together, and their chatter filled the quiet like the sound of birdsong. The first girl tilted her head and inquired, "What's your name?" "Nora," she said quietly. The girl said, "I'm Lily," with a smile. "And Rose is that. We are identical twins." With a tiny smile pulling at her lips, Nora remarked, "I can see that." Rose drew closer in spite of everything, her voice becoming a whisper. "Do you like horses?" I suppose I do," Lily responded. "Good," and gave a solemn nod. "Because Daddy has lots of horses and cows and chickens, and sometimes the chickens are mean, but Daddy says they're just protecting their eggs." Nora looked at the wagon's front end. With his back straight and his gaze focused on the road ahead, Caleb sat with his hands loose. Since they had left the station, he had remained silent. His silence was thick, impenetrable, and like a wall she couldn't see over. It wasn't mean. Rose pulled on the sleeve of Nora. "Can you braid hair?" "I can," Nora replied. Quietly, Lily remarked, "Mama used to braid our hair. However, she has since left." Nora felt her chest constrict. "I apologize." Rose's pure, wide eyes gazed up at her. "It's all right. She's among the angels, according to Daddy. However, we do miss her." "You certainly do," Nora muttered. They were all jostled when the wagon went into a rut. For the first time since they had gone, Caleb's voice broke through. The silence as Nora grasped the edge to support herself. "Wait back there." He spoke in a bland tone. It was bigger than Nora had anticipated, with a barn that leaned slightly to one side, a substantial home with a spacious porch, and fences that extended far into the distance, some of which were damaged, and others of which were sagging. Half-dried and neglected, the laundry hung limp on a line. Weeds have taken over the food garden. It was a location that was once maintained, but is now unmaintained. Without saying a word, Caleb stopped the wagon close to the house and got out. The twins hurried out after him, dragging Nora with them. He approached the porch, pushed open the door, and entered. On the doorway, Nora halted, uncertain, saying, "Come on." Lily pulled her hand. The house was silent and dark inside. The shafts of light that came in through the windows were filled with dust. The basin was piled high with dishes. Over the back of a chair was a shirt. The floor had just been swept. Caleb pointed to a small corridor. "There are rooms downstairs. The second door. You are welcome to remain there." Nora gave a nod. "Thank you." He didn't answer. His boots were heavy on the wooden floor as he turned and headed for the kitchen. Rose pulled at the skirt of Nora. "Visit our room." The girls' animated talk as they escorted her down the corridor stood in stark contrast to the weight that pervaded the house. Though modest, their room was neat. There were 2 small beds with worn-out quilts. A wooden doll with a fading painted face rested on a single pillow. There was a broken mirror on the wall. "This is where we sleep," Lily declared with pride. "It's very nice," Nora calmly remarked. Rose climbed into her bed and gave the area next to her a pat. "Will you sit with us?" The girls, one on each side, huddled close to Nora as she sat. She said, "Tell us a story, Lily." Nora said, "I don't know many stories." "That's okay," according to Rose. "Just make one up." Nora did as a result. She told them about a girl who lived in a valley where all of the stars in the sky had names, and the flowers grew taller than the trees. The girls listened with wide eyes until their heads became heavy against her arms and their breathing slowed. Nora looked up and stopped. Caleb watched silently in the doorway. For a brief moment, their eyes locked. Something flared there, but his countenance remained the same. Something she was unable to identify. After that, he turned and left. Nora woke up before the sun came up the following morning. She had trouble falling asleep. Her body was too restless and her thoughts was too noisy. Silently, she got ready and snuck from her room. The house remained motionless. She walked around the kitchen, observing the disarray, the frigid stove, the crusted dishes, and the unopened basket of mending in the corner. She was unable to just sit. She was never able to. She then filled the basin with water, lighted the stove, and started cleaning. The dishes were clean when the sun came up. They wiped the table. They swept the floor. Rubbing their eyes, the twins emerged from the doorway. Lily said, "You're awake," with surprise. "I am," Nora answered with a smile. "Are you making breakfast?" With optimism, Rose asked. "I am able to." She discovered eggs, flour, and some bacon. The girls sat at the table, swinging their legs and observing her with bright, inquisitive eyes while she prepared food. Caleb paused in the doorway as he entered from the barn. He looked around the spotless kitchen, the food that is placed on the table. The twins seated with full plates already eating, saying, "You didn't have to do this." "I understand," Nora said. "However, I desired to." He didn't answer, simply sat down, ate in solitude, and served himself. However, Nora saw he did not return the meal, didn't order her to cease. Didn't say she was a guest, and guests didn't work. All he did was eat. After finishing, he rose up, replaced his hat, and stopped at the entrance. Without glancing at her, he said, "If you're going to stay, boots are required." "It won't last a week for you," then he left. With a dish towel in her hands and a slightly accelerated heartbeat, Nora stood there. It wasn't goodwill. It wasn't cruelty, but it wasn't precisely either. And that was more than Nora Ashford had experienced in a long time. Days bled into one another, measured by the slow, steady beat of ranch life, chores, and perspiration. From sunrise until sunset, Nora toiled. Up till her knees hurt, she cleaned floors. Her shoulders burned from carrying water from the well. She kneaded dough till her hands cramped, fixed fences, and plucked weeds from the garden. She didn't complain, beg for a break, or demand recognition. She simply worked because that was the only language she knew, and the only method she had ever been given the opportunity to establish her value. She could feel Caleb's gaze on her as she took the clothes to the line and the feed to the horses, even if he wasn't watching directly. With perspiration on her forehead and dirt beneath her fingernails, she leaned over the garden. When she completed a task, he nodded without saying anything. One morning, without saying anything, she placed a pair of used boots on her porch and left tools in a reachable location. Despite filling every void, the twins followed Nora everywhere, talking like birds, asking countless questions, and lending a hand in their own awkward but sincere manner. Nora knelt in the garden one afternoon to pluck weeds. Lily sat next to her with a basket in her hand. "What causes weeds to grow?" Lily inquired. Noah replied, pulling a particularly thick root free. "Because they're stubborn. Whether they are wanted or not is irrelevant to them. They simply develop." Rose scowled from her seat on the opposite side. "That's unfortunate." "Why is that depressing?" Nora inquired. Rose answered, "Because no one wants them. But all they're doing is trying to survive." Nora stopped, her hands motionless in the soil. Her chest constricted as she gazed at the young girl. Softly, "You're right," she said. "They are." Lily bent over. "Do you think weeds know they're weeds?" Nora gave a small smile. "I'm not sure. Perhaps they mistake them for flowers." Rose stated resolutely. "Then we should let them stay." "Maybe a few," concurred Nora. "But not all of them, or the vegetables won't fit in." Lily gave a solemn nod. "It makes sense." Caleb's voice came out from the barn. "Let her work, girls." "We're assisting," Lily responded with a yell. A pause was followed by a softer, almost pleased tone. "You certainly are." Caleb entered the kitchen one evening when Nora was kneading bread. His scent was a combination of dust, leather, and horses. He placed the cup on the table after pouring himself some water from the pitcher. "You don't have to do all this," he expressed. Nora didn't raise her head. "I am aware. So why do you?" She folded the dough over and squeezed her fists into it once again. "Because I have to do something? Earn my spot." Caleb was silent for a while. He then retrieved a chair and took a seat. "You've got a spot already." Then Nora's hands froze. She gave him a startled expression. As usual, his expression was unreadable. His eyes, however, were not icy. They remained stable. "Sure. You owe me nothing," he stated. "Here you are not a servant. So what am I?" Quietly, she asked. He took a while to respond, only gazed at her. His jaw clenched as if the words were lodged in his throat. At last he replied, "You're someone my daughters chose. They also don't make poor decisions." Then Nora's throat constricted. She quickly blinked and returned her attention to the dough. "Thank you," she said in a whisper. With his chair scuffing the floor, Caleb stood up. He approached the door and stopped. "My wife," he replied softly. 2 years ago she passed away. Fever quickly overtook her. I was unable to save her." Nora gasped with surprise. He went on. "The girls don't remember much, only bits. The way she braided their hair, her voice, and her scent." Nora noticed the fracture in his armor for the first time when he turned to face her. He claimed that they hadn't grinned this way since she passed away. "Not until you arrived." The eyes of Nora blazed. "I'm not trying to replace her." "I know," responded Caleb, "but you're giving them something I couldn't, and for that, I'm grateful." Before she could reply, he turned and left. For the first time since Thomas's passing, Nora didn't feel like a burden as she stood there with her hands covered in flowers and her pulse racing. She had a sense of importance. After a week, the sky grew gloomy. With his gaze focused on the horizon, Caleb stood on the porch. The fragrance of rain and something heavier was carried by the increasing wind, something hazardous. "There will be storms," he remarked. Wiping her hands on her apron, Nora moved to stand next to him. "A poor one, perhaps?" The twins were so pleased that they rushed out onto the porch. "Daddy, may we watch the lightning?" "No," Caleb firmly stated. "You'll remain indoors." But now inside. There was no room for debate in his tone. Reluctantly, the females followed orders and retreated inside the house. Caleb gave Nora a look. "You ought to remain inside as well." "The cattle, what about them?" she inquired. "I'll take care of it. You cannot accomplish it by yourself." He clenched his jaw. "I've already done it." "Not tonight," Nora stated in a firm voice. "Tonight you have help." Something was changing in his eyes as he gazed at her. He then gave one nod, asked for a coat. "Things are about to get difficult." Like a fist, the storm hit. Cold and unrelenting, the rain fell in sheets. The wind howled, ripping at hair, clothes, and breath. As Caleb and Nora hurried towards the pasture, the cattle were already in a panic, their feet pounding the dirt and their eyes going white. "If we don't calm them down, they'll charge." Over the wind, Caleb yelled. Nora didn't think twice. With her arms outstretched and her voice steady and low, she ran towards the closest cow. "Easy, easy now. You're okay." The cow didn't flee. It only shifted and huffed. Stunned, Caleb observed her before going on to the next one. Working together, they led, soothed, and redirected the herd towards the barn's cover. Overhead, thunder splintered. The sky was split by lightning, followed by a scream. Nora's head turned quickly. Standing at the edge of the paddock, Lily and Rose were drenched, wide-eyed, and terrified. "What are you doing out here?" Caleb let out a yell. "Our goal was to assist," Lily sobbed. A cow escaped and charged at the girls. Nora was not thinking. She simply ran. With her arms out and her voice harsh and loud, she flung herself between the cow and the twins. "Stop, please. Give up." The cow swerved aside as her hooves slid through the muck. The twins sobbed as they crashed into Nora, who fell to her knees. A moment later, Caleb arrived and gathered them all in his arms. He continued, "You could have been killed," in a trembling voice. Rain poured down Nora's face as she gazed up at him. She stated, "You could too." Something changed between them as they knelt there in the mud for a while, the storm raging all around them. Anything genuine that neither of them could yet identify. The soil washed clean after the storm, but the air was still very cold. Both twins were exhausted from the terror of the night and were coughing and pallid in the morning. With her eyes red from lack of sleep, Nora walked between their beds like a shadow while changing clothes and stirring the soup. Caleb remained silent as he stood in the doorway. She had simply shook her head when he offered assistance. She had muttered, "They just need watching." She barely left them for 2 long days. Nora instantly clutched Lily's tiny hand when it stretched for hers. "You get some rest now," she whispered. Lily gave a drowsy blink. "You'll stay here, won't you?" "I will," answered Norris. "All night," Rose stirred beside her. "Is that what mothers do? Spend the entire night?" Norris's throat tightened. "The good ones make an effort." Rose gave a small smile and fell back asleep. As the fever subsided, the fire burned low. Weariness softened every line of Nora's face as she sat slouched on the chair. With his arms folded and the lantern light dancing over him, Caleb observed from the doorway. He remained silent and observed her delicate movements as she brushed the girl's hair from her foreheads. Yes. Once more, there was no breeze outside. The twins' steady, unhurried breathing was the only sound coming from inside. Something unsaid between them settled in that silence. The silent start of belonging and trust. The next few days were different. Caleb stopped merely observing. He spoke with her, asked her questions, and worked next to her. One time, while they were repairing a fence together, he inquired, "Where did you learn to handle cattle?" Nora remarked, "My husband had a small farm. I was helpful in every way. He didn't give me many options." Caleb gave her a quick look. "You didn't love him?" It wasn't a question. With calm hands, Nora drove a nail into the post. "No, I didn't, but I made an effort to be a decent wife." "You were, I'm sure." "Not in his opinion." Caleb paused his work and looked at her. "He was an idiot then." Startled, Nora glanced up at him. His eyes were steady and his face looked serious. He remarked, "You're among the strongest people I've ever met. And you are not worthy of anyone who was unable to recognize that." Nora felt her chest constrict. She quickly blinked and turned her head away. She said, "Thank you," in a whisper. For a brief moment, Caleb's hand briefly touched hers as he reached out. Then he returned his attention to the fence and continued to work. The twins pleaded with Nora one afternoon to let them assist baking biscuits. At last, she caved in and rolled up their sleeves while tying aprons that were far too large. Lily ceremoniously poured flour. Too much, too quickly. Everything was covered by a white cloud that exploded skyward. Blinking through the powder, Nora let out a gasp. Her hair and clothes ghosted white. Silence for a heartbeat. The twins then burst out laughing. "You appear to be a snow woman." Rose clapped her fists and squealed. Despite her best efforts to sneer, Nora couldn't help but smile. "You two are having problems." Lily called out to the open doorway. "Daddy, come view our work." Attracted by the noise, Caleb emerged. After glancing at Nora, who had a flower in her hair and twins smiling up at her, he burst out laughing. "Are you going to start a blizzard or bake?" he inquired. "Both, apparently," Nora remarked, using the back of her forearm to wipe her face. "You're next, Daddy," Lily said. And Rose threw a bunch of flowers at him directly before he could move. It struck him right in the chest. The twins were frozen for a moment, quiet. Then, brilliant and defenseless, Nora's laugh erupted. Caleb's forehead progressively raised. He took a step forward, staring at her. "So," he said quietly. He then softly dusted a line of flour across her cheek after dipping his fingers in the bowl. The twins laughed and yelled. His hand hovered for a moment, causing Nora's breath to catch. His thumb lightly and purposefully touched her skin, not in a playful way. The commotion surrounding them subsided as their gazes locked through the floating flour dust. Something changed. Tender, heated, and unsaid, the air between them became silent. Then, laughing, Rose broke it. "Nora is liked by Daddy," Lily let out a gasp. "He does, as we said." Caleb straightened and coughed. "Okay, enough of the shenanigans. Clean up for dinner." Still laughing, the twins fled, leaving a trail of white footprints in their wake. Wiping her hands and trying not to smile, Nora turned back to the table. She said, "You didn't have to join their nonsense." Behind her, Caleb's voice was quiet. "It didn't bother me." She glanced over her shoulder and saw the silent warmth in his gaze once more. Something deeper now, not laughter. Neither moved for a long moment, and something delicate and lovely started to take root in that tiny kitchen covered in flowers as the aroma of bread and laughing permeated the air. With golden sunshine and the aroma of freshly baked bread, Sunday morning finally arrived. With shaky hands, Nora smoothed her finest clothing as she dressed carefully. She had been invited to join Caleb and the girls at church. Requested, not ordered. She had also replied in the affirmative. The twins had bright eyes, spotless clothing, and neatly braided hair. "Nora, you look lovely." "So do you, Nora," Lily asked with a smile. With his hat in hand and an enigmatic countenance, Caleb emerged from the doorway. "Are you ready?" She gave a nod. It was a calm ride into town. The twins exchanged words. Nora and Caleb didn't. The weight of things felt but not yet expressed was carried by their silence. Heads turned when they arrived at the church. Immediately, whispers rose. "That's her, the station employee. She still resides there with him. Single, disgraceful." Despite her twisted gut, Nora raised her chin. With his hand lingering close to her back without making contact, Caleb strolled by her side, steady and protective. Unaware of the steps, the twins gripped her hands. They chose a seat close to the rear. As the sermon started, Nora found it difficult to concentrate. She sensed the condemnation in every look and every word. The Reverend then stopped in the middle. He said, "Mr. Thorne," his voice resonating throughout the space. "Concerns have been raised regarding the woman who lives in your home." Quiet. Caleb clenched his jaw. "Is that correct?" "We're considering appropriateness," the Reverend stated. "To whom?" Caleb asked in a cool but sharp voice. "To God, to the community." Caleb got up. The twins' eyes widened as they gazed up. "Let me clarify." With iron-like steadiness, he spoke. "My daughter's life was saved by Nora Ashford. She has taken care of my girls when I was unable to, worked my ranch, and asked for nothing in return." The Reverend moved. Caleb continued. "The day she arrived, this town made fun of her, made her feel inferior by calling her names. My daughters, however, witnessed what none of you did. Her heart was visible to them." His gaze softened as he turned to face Noah. "I did the same." With tears in her eyes, Nora's breath caught. Caleb turned back to the assembly. "I won't let her be embarrassed, but if anyone here has an issue with her staying, they can talk to me about it. No more." Lily's voice was clear and loud as she abruptly stood on the pew. "She should be our mother. Rose would always be by her side." The church went cold. Then an older woman arose from the front. "I was mistaken," she muttered. I assessed her. "I apologize." A second female came next. "I was too." Others stood one by one. "Enough, but not all." Clearing his throat, the Reverend said, "That should settle it, I guess." Caleb extended his hand to grasp Nora's. The twins hurried after them as they left together. Caleb halted outside beneath the expansive blue sky. His voice was scratchy when he said, "Nora Ashford. I'm not a fancy word, man. I want you, though, and I know what I want." Her heart froze, "Not because you were selected by my daughters. You are the strongest, sweetest, and most obstinate woman I have ever met, not because you belong here. And I don't want to be without you for another day." He then fell to one knee. The twins let out a gasp. "Are you going to wed me?" The tears streamed down Nora's cheeks. "Yes," she muttered, growing more forceful. "Yes, I will." He got up and drew her into his embrace. They were surrounded by the twins, who were crying and giggling. The residents of the town observed from the doorway. Some turned aside, some murmured, and some grinned. The voices throughout the town died away. The embarrassment vanished like the mist of daybreak, and something more powerful, something indestructible, took its place. Because often the folks we least expect are the ones who recognize our value. And sometimes the truth is loudest when the smallest voices are heard. I appreciate you being here. We appreciate your faith in these women. And we appreciate you reminding us all that value is something that can be acquired. It just is. For more, subscribe. And see you in the upcoming